So, Amy, today's podcast is going to be a little different. If you're good with it, we usually provide, basic education on specific things. The other week we did VA home loans. We've talked about the DoD, FSA. So today I wanted to talk about something a little more conceptual on the planning side that I've been thinking about recently as I work with more and more military clients that are approaching retirement or who have recently retired and trying to figure out the ultimate retirement plan. Um, and really, this can extend to anybody that's got a pension, especially if it's kind of indexed to inflation. That probably useful to them also. So you good with that?
Yeah, that sounds really intriguing. I'm excited.
Welcome to Operation Retirement Readiness, where Amy and Mike, two certified financial planners, talk about how military members can prepare for transition and how veterans can prepare for ultimate retirement. This podcast represents the views of the hosts and any guest. It is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax, financial, or legal advice. All information is regarded to be from reliable sources. The hosts are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional advice.
So I mean, like I said, the more I work with clients who are getting that military pension, I see that really once they turn on Social Security, once they're eligible for that, and we figure out, when that makes sense to turn on, pretty much, most of their planned day-to-day spending is covered. That's all their essential spending, which I consider their food, their housing, their transportation, their medical, and their utilities. That's all covered. But then even the level above that, that's the nice to have. You know, Vacations, going out to eat, all those things. They've got enough income coming in, and that's a huge benefit. And I think it can really change, what that time between military retirement and ultimate retirement is. So you also see that with clients?
I do, and what's interesting is a lot of times what I see with clients is they might also know that when Social Security gets turned on, those expenses are covered, so they're very anxious to turn it on. Um, so a lot I spend quite a bit of time, not with all clients. Usually it's a pretty easy sell for the client where, one spouse is the main breadwinner. They are often also the older spouse because often it's the male, and so it's usually easy. It's an easy sell to wait for that person to wait until 70. It's harder when that's not really the case, when it doesn't work out like that, to still convince people that at least one spouse should wait until 70. So I think this topic of getting to 70 is a really great topic to talk about because it's so important for our type of clients.
Yeah. So, and we've done, I think we did a couple shows on Social Security claiming and how that all works. So if you're kind of confused on those logistics, definitely go back and listen to those previous episodes. But um, yeah, like you said, maximum benefit is at 70. Spousal things and survivor benefits that can be tied to whoever's getting the bigger benefit. So understanding that's key. But and again, talking day to day expenses, if you've got other things that you want to do, you know, buy the second home, or you want to leave a big inheritance, or not but you need to figure out your long-term care plan. Can that be covered by just that income that you're going to have guaranteed, or do you need something else to cover that? But you probably don't need that, $2 million war chest again, unless you've got other expenses that you're trying to cover. You probably need a smaller, you could need a smaller nest egg than somebody that doesn't have that pension coming in and has to live off that principal over their next how many years, and they don't know how long that's going to be. So thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and and the idea isn't, Mike. I don't think, Mike, you're saying that you don't need to worry about saving for retirement and things like that. It's just that the way that military retirees can or should think about their retirement is different than the average civilian person who isn't going to have a pension, and might have a smaller Social Security check. Right? Did I get that right, Mike?
No, exactly. You still want to plan, but having this understanding can be freeing, if you will, give you more options where if you take care of those things, you figure out what your kind of buffer is that you want to make sure you have, add on the inheritance, add on the long-term care. Okay, we've got this manageable amount of money that we can say, yes, this is what we hope we have, need to have at 70, and feel really, really confident in the plan. And you don't need, again, that multi-million dollar thing that's going to also be providing you that daily income to just live. So yeah, that's a great point. um, and so looking at that, coming up with that kind of number, how does that change in your mind how you get there, how you get to 70, or again, whenever you're going to claim Social Security?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, like I said, a lot of a lot of what I spend time with on the stuff that I spend time going over with clients and kind of trying to sell them on is this idea that they should wait for Social Security. And the reason I am able to do it oftentimes is because you can very clearly see, okay, you need money at the beginning of your plan until Social Security turns on. You need a teeny tiny bit of money, usually, until long-term care starts kicking in. So there's this big gap. And so when you start thinking about, like, okay, what does that mean? Well, we have to have money for the end of year expenses, which tend to be big because that's the long-term care stuff, right? But what it means is that, there's a good chance that you already were saving some things. That means that there's a big bucket of money, or some amount of money that can stay pretty aggressively invested. Because if you're in your 50s and 60s, that's still, hopefully 20, 30, 40 years away. So I think that's at one big point. People are ready to get very conservative when they retire. But the idea that you have these big expenses near the end of your plan, and things that are at the beginning of your plan, some amount at the beginning, right, getting to age 70, but in between age 70 and whenever the end of year stuff or end of life stuff starts happening, is kind of this space where you don't need to rely so heavily on your portfolio. So I think it has big implications for thinking about how you invest money, not just where you're going to get money from.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, don't have to, like you said, don't have to be as potentially conservative because oh, it's got to last type thing. If you've got hopefully 15, 20 years between 70, or even more if you go all the way back to retirement, till you hopefully need that long-term care money, long gap where growth can take a lot of that need away. So definitely good there. And I find just it gives you, in my mind, more options to retire earlier, to or change how you want to live in your 50s and 60s, because again, you're set further out, once you turn on that. So okay, if you have been a diligent saver, that can open up some opportunities, either to maybe work less in your 50s and 60s because you've got your nest egg that can continue to grow, you drop from the crazy, 50, 60 hour a week job to, okay, I'm gonna work 30 hours a week and just, be more balanced in my life that you may not have had previously with either the military or that second career, when you're still trying to make it. So, um, how about thoughts on those type of options?
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal. And I think though, one of the things to keep in mind is that if one of your goals is to retire in your 50s, and I know a lot of military people really do hope that, maybe when they retire, they can, if not fully retire, retire and do the job that they want to do for fun. I've got clients that, they want to be divers. Like they just want to go do dive training, or, just they want like this fun job that might not pay a lot of money. Um, but what that means is you have to be really thoughtful about where you're saving your money. So, your retirement accounts are fantastic for financing things after you're 59 and a half. It's a little expensive if you're retiring before 59 and a half. Um, and just, being thoughtful about how you structure your investments in the taxable. So if you're not saving in retirement accounts, then you're probably saving in brokerage accounts, and being thoughtful about what those investments look like, is really important. But I think, Mike, probably the most fascinating part of this discussion, I think, is actually not the financial stuff. It's, designing a life and that you want and how you'll feel in that life. And, um, what do you think? What do you think it looks like for somebody who has, let's just say, like, done it perfectly? Nobody's perfect, right? But let's just say for the person who has managed to pull off about as perfect as possible, just talk about the advantages that they get to enjoy, when they're set up to finance life between whenever they fully retire and getting to age 70.
Yeah, so I'll throw out a couple examples actually. One, a good friend of mine, also another '06, retired a little bit, I think like 6 months before I did, and went to work, still live in DC, went to work in the follow-on job doing business development, making good money, and worked, I think it was about 2 or 3 years, and was just like, I'm not having fun. This love the military, but this stuff isn't for me. And still has some kids that I think his oldest now is in junior high, or his youngest now is in junior high, and has one in high school and one in college. But he decided, hey, I'm going to retire. I'm going to, just hang it up. I'm going to be, uh, Mr. Mom, for those of you old enough to remember that movie, and stay at home, take the kids to school each day, run them to their practices, all of that stuff. His wife's still working, I don't think full time, but at least part time. And just is like, no, we've got enough. Not worrying about it. So that's what he wanted to do, and he's doing it. Check in with him semi regularly and just ask him, hey, how's it going? Still retired? He's like, oh yeah, I'm still enjoying it. And he says, hey, I may do something again once his youngest is in college and there isn't all of that to still do, again, but it'd probably be more of a part time or lifestyle gig. I'll say, and also personally for me, was starting the business. This was one of the things that, being planners, I had it all mapped out and like, okay, yeah, we need to get to 70. I've got some money saved, I can put the business in place and, make that as, you know, small or large and control how much I want to work. So right now I'm not expecting to grow this into, a monstrosity, with tons of planners and, want to be $1 billion firm or anything like that. I'm just looking to help, uh, you know, people be able to retire when they want to and live their life. So yeah, I think can give you options, again, if you understand, your big picture. And that's why I think it's important to, really dive in and know your numbers and know what that looks like for the very long term. And, then it may open up more options that you weren't thinking of. So.
Yeah. And I think, besides just, maybe retiring when you want, and that might be early for a lot of people. Let's say like you continue working until what I'll call a more traditional age, whether that's 62 or 65 or 67. The difference in lifestyle that you undertake when you do retire could very well be huge, because you have the security of knowing that your basic expenses are going to be covered, and you've financed what you expect to be your end of year, not financed, but you've already saved and are invested for your end of life expenses. So the kind of lifestyle that you enjoy, even if you're the person who didn't, you weren't able to retire early, maybe you weren't that far on top of things, or that's not what you want. But the kind of lifestyle that you get to enjoy is very different if you're not worried about how you're going to come up with all of your living expense money when you're 73 and 75 and 82, because most of that stuff is pretty well covered. So you can, not be irresponsible, but certainly pursue your dreams. So if you want to go on a cruise to Antarctica, you can probably get on a cruise and go to Antarctica and not worry about the fact that you've got to use some of your portfolio. Again, like Mike said, you got to know your numbers. But there's a good chance, if you're a military retiree with a pension, and you're going to have a nice Social Security check when it starts at 70, there's a good chance that you can do more things than maybe civilian counterparts can do.
And there's a lot of studies, I'm sure you've read them, that say that having that income just allows you to spend more, and most of those people are actually happier in retirement, because, again, if you're not worried about it, you've got that paycheck coming in just like when you were working, like clockwork. It's, the first of the month, you're going to get that retirement check, and then you're going to get your Social Security check, typically mid-month. But, having that just makes spending, easier for folks, versus if it's all in that 401k as a civilian, unless you kind of annuitize it or do something else, folks get concerned. We've had some, the market is not always going to go straight up. You've got the, ups and downs. And if you're looking at your balance and you're starting to spend out of that, it can be, kind of unnerving. But if you've got that income coming in and it's going to be there the next month, like you said, if you want to do that cruise or you want to go on that trip, you're able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think, just to wrap it up is, to keep in mind that, take a look at your pension, take a look at what life is going to look like when you start drawing Social Security, figure out how much you need for those end of life expenses, and then get, serious about the lifestyle you're able to enjoy, without being, don't be reckless, but you don't have to be quite as conservative. So I think that's where a lot of really good financial planning can come in, whether you're doing it yourself or you're getting some help with somebody.
Yeah, and the other nice thing is, between whenever you say retirement, or, maybe it's, partial retirement and you're working less, the nice thing is knowing that 70 date, once you have that, or when you're going to take Social Security, it's now a defined time. So if you're going to retire at 60 and, you're going to turn on Social Security at 70, well, you can map out your expenses and go, oh, this is a 10-year. It's not an unknowable. If I need to generate $50,000 a year for 10 years, okay, that's $500,000. You can have that set aside, index it to inflation, do all that, but that's a known number that you can, definitely plan for, versus, again, more of the unknowns, longevity things that if you weren't covered by a pension and Social Security, get all the more tricky for figuring out. So
Yeah, I think this is I think this has been a really important conversation for folks. I hope they, start thinking about what retirement looks like maybe a little bit differently, the glide path and things like that. Been a great conversation, Mike. Did we miss anything?
no, I think that pretty much hit what I wanted to talk about. So glad we could do this more you know I guess non-technical, more thought pieces podcast. So it was great talking to you.
Good to talk to you, Mike. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye-bye.
To get transcripts, show notes, or more information, go to operationretirementreadiness.com. Have a question or topic for the podcast? Send it to info@operationretirementreadiness.com. Find out more about Amy and Mike at their websites. Mike is the founder of Next Mission Financial Planning, LLC. He retired from the U.S. Air Force and has worked in the financial services sector since 2021. He is a certified financial planner, chartered financial consultant, and a certified college financial consultant. You can find out more about Mike at nextmissionfinancialplanning.com. Amy is the founder of Instar Financial Planning, LLC. She is retired from the U.S. Army and has worked in the financial services sector since 2019. She's a certified financial planner, a chartered federal employee benefits counselor, and a chartered retirement planning counselor. You can find out more about Amy at instarfp.com.